Good morning, lovely viewers. We're happy to have you today, and we are glad to be joined by you. We welcome you from the Empowerment Service and those who joined us at Victory Church. The weather has been, a little bit cold in the morning, and we had a talk show in the morning also from our Ministry of ICT. We're happy that you're keeping it Doxa TV and DreamTV. We're back with your show, The Scorecard. My name is Mahuzi Calvin, and today we're going to be diving into the discussion of climate change and environmental conservation. But before we go that direction, we actually want to commend committees of parliament have been doing business, and we appreciate that business is running smoothly, especially when it goes that side. Something that I want to commend the Speaker of Parliament, Right Honourable Maxon Zoboth and Right Honourable Thomas Tayebwa, that in the 12th Parliament, the committees of Parliament have worked and they have been able to deliver when it comes to oversight and when it comes to making sure government is being put to the job they're supposed to do. We saw Honourable Balamba Gahare and Honourable Justin Namere appearing before Park local government headed by Honourable Betty Namboze, and we also was looking at the X for Honourable Zake. He's also in the field. First time I'm seeing opposition committees actually doing work effectively. The reason why we cite out such committees, because when you look at the Government Assurance Committee, in the other term it was headed, I think, by Joyce Wagala, Honourable, former Member of Parliament, and also deputized by Omugaratia, that is Honourable Abed Wanika. Now, there was not so much work that was done with them, but now we are seeing Honourable Zake and Honourable Anna Deke. They are doing some good work. So we appreciate the committees that are doing work. Also, we appreciate the leadership of Parliament that is making sure that these committees are doing work. We have also seen the Committee on Physical Infrastructure. Honourable Mwine Mpaka is doing some good work. Kosase is doing some good work. We are yet to see, we have also seen the Committee on Legal and Parliamentary Affairs. My boss and colleague, I think Honourable Marshall Olenyo sits on the committee, and we have been seeing the committee do some good work. So we continue to pray that they continue to do the work and they continue being availed with the avenues and also resources that can enable them to do the work. Today we are with Noah Akatukunda Katiti, and he is a spokesperson or a communications officer for the African Initiative on Food Security and Environment, for an organization he will tell us. But when I was making my research before we came on air, I was looking at the environmental laws we have, the National Environmental Act, CAP 181. I was looking at also the Nile Basin Initiative Act of CAP 189 that was commenced on the 1st of November 2002. There are other laws in line with environment. When we are dealing with climate change, we have had, I think, COP30 now when it comes to climate change and participation. We have seen Ugandans take part of it. We have seen the Prime Minister has attended some of those initiatives, or UN organized avenues for climate. We even have a Minister for Disaster Preparedness when it comes to that. We also have a Minister of Environment, Water, and they're doing a good job. I think now Honourable Kahido Tafire is the one in that sector. Now, when we are discussing issues of climate change, for now, I'm going to still call upon government to handle the issue of Karamoja. We can't have a nation that has food and people are dying of hunger. So those are some of the issues we're going to talk about climate change. I was making a policy paper on compensation, especially when it comes to the areas that are in oil, where the Talenga project is going to pass, and I was making a little bit of research, and you would see people are complaining of change of livelihoods, and one of the policy papers I was reading, they were talking about restoration of livelihood, where you're changing one person from one area to another. For example, if you're going to be shifted from Hoima and they're taking you to Kiliandongo, the seasons are changing, and if you had 100 acres in Hoima, the money they have given you cannot buy you the same 100 acres in Kiliandongo. So those are the discussions on climate change, on seasons, on environmental conservation. So all that we're going to dive in it with Noah. Noah, good morning.
Yes, good morning, Calvin. Good morning, our viewers and listeners. I'm called Katit Noah Katkunda. I am the Communications Officer with African Initiative on Food Security and Development. We are community-based. It is a non-government organization that is community-based that handles all matters concerning environment and conservation and transition to renewable energy and all that, all combined.
We're going to start with this issue of climate change. One
Yes.
of the persistent issues we have in the country is the Karamoja sub-region discussion of drought, prolonged famine. We have this, especially in other parts of the region, especially when we go to the Kato corridor. There is a prolonged season of dry rains or dry seasons where there are no rains.
Yes.
And today, the eastern part of the world is facing tsunamis and floods and all that. But now, because there is a wind that is going around in the eastern part of the world.
Yes.
When we are discussing climate change, let's start with Uganda per se, and we are going to do it on a regional basis.
Yes.
Let's start with the most patent discussion of the northern region of our country. What are the challenges that are giving us headache, especially when it comes to the northern region?
I want to first commend the government for the good work they have done. Of course, you cannot say they are always good and bad.
Yes.
They cannot perform so good, considering the fact that we are a developing country. I have to first commend them for the work they have done, and it's very unfortunate that our brothers and sisters in Karamoja, the Karamoja region, are facing such severe catastrophes. All closely, I think the biggest percentage is attributed to climate change, and it's very unfortunate. And I call upon everybody who can at least lend a hand or something, can do something, because I was there recently, and of course we did what we could, but of course it wasn't enough. And if you really can do anything to make sure that at least we save the lives of our colleagues, it would be very generous of you. Going back to the topic, as you said, different regions have different topologies, and of course, for example, the northern region, it is very different from the eastern region. We have seen a lot of water that bring along landslides in the eastern region, in the eastern parts of the country. Now, for the case of the northern part, specifically Karamoja, they are much more of a flat land, and that is very dangerous if it comes to conservation and making sure that the situation is mitigated, because it would be easier to mitigate if there was a valley, a hill. You understand? I'm just trying to break it for someone who is out there and cannot. So if it was a valley that you can go into the valley, you get some water, but a flat land is it is always scarce with water, because if water comes, it goes immediately. There's nowhere it can for example, like a wetland, something like that. They are very scarce in those regions. So I think looking in two ways to conserve and what is already there, because I think the first things would be to conserve, and we see how we can plant trees and make sure that we bring in such things that can sustain their lives.
Okay. When we look at the issue of climate change, we also have the discussions of change of topographies, especially the seasons we are in, because of surprisingly here, I was reading the National Climate Change Act Cap 182, and this was passed around 2021.
Yes.
Now, as Uganda, we have laws in place, especially when catastrophes like this happen. We have prepared ourselves for legal frameworks. But when it comes to policy implementation and making sure that these legal frameworks are supported by a team or people who are putting them into implementation, we are failing. If we go away from Karamoja sub-region, we have had persistent floods, we have had persistent landslides, mudslides in Bugisu sub-region. When you look at Kapchora, when you look at Bududa, Budaka, Bulambuli, Mbale, there have been issues of landslides, mudslides, and all that kind of stuff. The preparedness for the change that is happening around the world, especially when it comes to climate change, is Uganda prepared to address these issues, and how should it prepare itself in line with addressing climate change?
Straight to the point, I think, as a country, Uganda, a third world country, we are not ready enough considering our capacity, our economic capacity. But we can minimize and manage with what is available. And I'm very happy that in every other budget, at least a certain amount of money is allocated to Office of Prime Minister. All those, we are actually very lucky that we have a whole ministry for disaster and preparedness. That is very good. And we have been with these catastrophes. River Mamba in Kasese, we've had landslides, we've had hunger for a very long time. It's very unfortunate that as a country we have not devised means to make sure that we interact with these catastrophes that we have been with centuries, over years, by the way, more than 10 years. This is very unfortunate. There has to be sustainable solutions, and which has not been done. I'm not saying that nothing has been done yet, but at least we should be seeing something, considering the fact that we have had these challenges for a very long time. You cannot experience something today, something tomorrow, and something the other day, and you still don't find a solution for that. But still, we appreciate the government. Of course, it always tries as much as it could, regardless of course, its own internal challenges and all that. But at least there is something that has been done, and then unfortunately, it's inadequate to my perspective, because you cannot experience something every year, and you still haven't found a sustainable solution for the problem.
The issue of landslides and mudslides, when we still had, I think, Honorable Agnes Nandoto in charge of Karamoja sub-region, but even before we go there, they had planted bamboo trees on the slopes of Elgon, and they had also looked at the relocation plan for people who are living on the slopes of Elgon. When you look at that implementation to curb the number of deaths that are happening due to the change in climate, or to the things that are affecting the people, especially the mudslides and landslides, is it a sustainable model for government to just look at relocation rather than how it can do it, so that people can maintain their sustainability or livelihood and also continue living and existing with the changes of climate?
I have been to the parts of the oil corridor in Hoima, those districts close, and we have seen how, if you have ever been there, you have seen how livelihoods have changed very dramatically, and which is not good, because if you're taken to another district, given a smaller piece of land compared to what you had, let's say you're given money for a certain amount, for a piece of land, and you have to move to another district, that cannot be the same as how you were in the previous district. Now, when it comes to the government, there are better sustainable ways, because we have seen these things happen in China, where a desert is turned into a forest in the shortest period of time. Now, if a desert can be turned into a forest in those countries, of course they have their own capacity, but we also have our own capacity. As you said, they planted bamboos. So if they planted bamboos, is there something sustainable that can be done to make sure that at least we keep those people in place with enough sensitization? In fact, the government has done sensitization, but I think, of course, as you know how we Ugandans are, we are always so adamant to adopt to such situations. But still, if the government has a limited amount of budget, I think there's something sustainable that can be done to maintain the status, the livelihood of those people living in that area, as well as keeping the environment minimal, to make sure that we don't also increase a lot, to make sure that we don't also interfere with the other districts. Yes.
When we are talking about the issue of climate change, we tend to negate the growing factor, the growing population. People are now increasing and they're looking for livelihoods, and they're also getting into areas where back then they were conservated areas, but now we have people who are going there for either farming. When you look at Rubiji here in Kampala, you'd find that people are encroaching on the swamp. This is before even we go to the issue of environmental conservation. We are just on the issue of livelihoods of people. People are now dealing into farming in these gazetted areas. People are now looking for houses where they can stay. They're buying even plots of land, I think 50 by 100 or something of the sort, and they're staying there. The growing population vis-a-vis the issue of climate change, how are we looking at it? Because even when you go to the areas of Umbale, and what the president has always said, stop staying on the slopes of these mountains, because we know at any time when the rains come, there will be a disaster. But people don't have anywhere else to go. These are the cheapest places, and these are the places I've stayed in for a very long time. Now the population grows, and the settlements are growing, and people are adapted to only staying in these places. When you look at Bulambuli, the livelihoods are not so much good, but it's a hilly area.
It's a home to them.
Yes. So when you look at the growth of the population of the country vis-a-vis climate change, as a country, what are supposed to be some of the things we're addressing in line with that?
As you mentioned, we have laws in place, and we have agencies. For example, NEMA, we have a full Ministry of Environment and Water that are supposed to be to manage these such situations. They are mandated by law to make sure that at least we have protected areas. I remember there was a time when we were fighting for Bugoma Forest. It's a forest in Hoima. Bugoma Forest. Yes, Bugoma Forest. It didn't have demarcation, and almost half of, not half, but a very good chunk of land was taken off, deforested, and given off to someone, to a certain company, to plant sugarcane. Now that is not sustainable. I mean, you cannot just eradicate the whole habitat for economic gains. Well, that is good for a country, but it's not economically. It is good, but it is not sustainable when it comes to environment. So the government has everything it needs, all resources required from funds, I think, because there is always a budget allocated to that. The implementation has not been enough, considering the fact that we have NEMA, very many agencies, National Forestry Authority, very many agencies, and a whole full ministry to make sure that at least we have reserved areas. Now, if you go to Rela is a wetland, a natural wetland spanning over 20 kilometers. That is in central, not in central Uganda, but it is in Uganda region, Masaka. If you're going along Masaka Road, and it is under severe sand mining. It is facing mass rice growing, which is not good for the environment. Of course, this is a habitat for several marine species like the mudfish and all that, frogs, that are very important to the ecosystem. And unfortunately, when it comes to that, NEMA, these agencies that have that are responsible to make sure that these protected areas are enough, which are well resourced with funds, with laws, and of course enforcement, because there's also environmental police that is supposed to handle that sector. And all these resources have unfortunately gone unused.
Okay, when we're looking at the issue of environment,
yes,
and the issue of sustainability, we also have the issue of the mineral sector. The mineral sector has contributed to a lot of degeneration of our soils.
yes.
When you look at mining areas like Mubende, Nakasongola, when you look at areas like Karamoja itself is a mining area. When you look at these mining areas, they're facing issues of environmental degradation.
Yes.
When you even go around Lake Katwe, Bunyoro itself actually is problematic because they have a lot of minerals and they're facing, I think, the highest level of environmental degradation and climate change, especially in the Mid-East Western sub-region. Now, the issue of minerals is an economic part of our nation, and we need them for
Growth.
growth of the economy.
Yes.
As people who are in climate change advocacy, what are the solutions we're offering to government, coexisting with the economic part and also the sustainability part of the people living in areas where they're doing the mining from?
The solutions that people dealing in environment that would offer, I personally deal in environment and conservation and climate change. And I wouldn't say that I don't want my country to grow, because I personally graduated, but unfortunately I can tell you that things are not the way I expected them to be when I was still studying. Of course, we are told education is the key. So I wouldn't want someone in mineral education, something like that, petroleum exploration, to complete and unfortunately they don't get a job when we have oil and other minerals underground. Now, how best can the options we are offering to the government is how best can this be done without interfering with the ecosystem, without interfering with the biodiversity, because we cannot exist alone in this universe. There's a reason as to why there's chicken at home. Chicken eats an earthworm, the earthworm ate soil, something like that. It is an ecosystem, and we have to coexist with each and every species in this biodiversity. Now, when a certain area is, perhaps let's say a forest is massively deforested, now that means we have lost bees that are very important to our food security, because they are the best, they pollinate almost 75% of our food that we eat. Now, if you lose bees, if you lose birds, if you lose other animals that have been living around this whole habitat, it means the whole livelihoods of people within, in fact not within that area of the whole country, are at risk. Now, the government, first and foremost, I'll give you an example of the East African crude oil pipeline that has been under construction for over 10 years, and the country is expecting oil very soon because it's now on 91%. And there has been massive deforestation in that region. And if you go along here, Masaka, there are some areas where people's livelihoods have been interrupted, of course, and affected, considering the fact that almost a big chunk of their land has been taken. And of course, you know, we Ugandans, we largely depend on agriculture to sustain our lives, income, and all that. So how best can the government do this? Of course, is to review, because now, for example, as a country, according to the Paris Agreement, we must have nationally determined contributions. And of course, one of the major important things in these NDCs is conservation. Are they, during the implementation or the mining of these minerals, are there enough conservation guidelines followed? Are they conserving? Those are the things that they are supposed to be looking at. Are there enough policies to make sure that at least these people's livelihoods are not affected so much? Of course, there are always casualties in growth, but it shouldn't be so severe like how it has been before in gold mines and all other, for example, in Hoima, where the East African crude oil pipeline has affected thousands and thousands of livelihoods. And that is very unfortunate. I condemn it personally, and I call upon those responsible shareholders and stakeholders to act accordingly. But my point is, the government and all the stakeholders should always review and look into how best they can protect the environment before they implement the projects, as well as because we cannot have a project, we cannot like money more than the people living around. So they should also always make sure that they protect people's livelihoods, because at least we can conserve nature tomorrow. But I mean, we have to first live first. You have to first be alive before you conserve nature. And it is very important to make sure that at least these guidelines are reviewed, are first and foremost in place, reviewed and implemented, made sure that make sure that these policies are in place and implemented.
Now, when we're looking at the issue of policy implementation, we have had I have read to you laws. I have read to you the COP30s that happened in Dubai and all that stuff, and government of Uganda has participated in it. Now, we have organizations like yours that are into most of its sensitization, because I don't want to say implementation, because implementation at time, if you're implementation partners, you need a go-ahead from government. And some of the implementations are so costly that private sector organizations like yours cannot have the implementation. When we go to the grassroots of sensitization and making sure people understand the effects of climate change, how do we measure, or if it is a scorecard, how do we rate ourselves on making sure that people understand that climate change is a discussion that we should be having, and we should prepare ourselves on where we are going in the next 20 to 30 years?
I think until now, people hadn't realized that climate change is real. And I think most of our population, the biggest part of our population, is still living in climate change denial. And they, in fact, don't know that we are experiencing this, and it's coming on us as soon as possible, like so swiftly. So the government and the stakeholder and private institutions like African Initiative on Food Security and Development and all other NGOs and stakeholders that are in climate, we have done sensitization. I think most of us have done our part, those that are able, because I have been in oil-affected regions, and we have done sensitization. Recently, we were down in Waise doing sensitization about proper waste management and how best this can be turned into livelihood-changing opportunity, like turning waste into composite, such things. And we have done our part, sensitization. I think sensitization is the first thing. Then before you interpret the whole civil laws and policies to them. They cannot know policies before they know the challenge. Because in Waise, we all know that Waise is commonly known for flooding. But the challenge is always simple. They get waste and they dump it anywhere. Now, waste goes into these drainage channels, and unfortunately they clog, which means water cannot move freely.
Now, when you look at the human causes of climate change, especially when it comes to our waste management, that we have failed to manage waste, that is the plastic waste and renewable waste. Now, we have also not addressed the issue of dumping sites. We are dumping waste that can, I think, degenerate, and then we're also dumping waste that cannot degenerate or reusable waste in the lands, and that is affecting our soils and all that. Now, when it comes to human causes of climate change, industrialization, waste management, and
there are very many.
All that. How are we dealing with that as a problem for our growth in the climate change activism as a country? Because we're not looking at organizations, we're looking as a country, Uganda. How are we dealing with the issues of human-caused changes to climate change?
When it comes to dealing with human-caused climate change situations, I think the first sector to look at are the people on ground, the frontline communities. And they are the most affected because now I'll give an example of Waise, because I started from Akere, so Waise was near. I'll just give an example of it. And these people, when other people are in Kololo sleeping comfortably, now people in Waise in the middle of the night are holding their mattresses instead of sleeping up, such that the water doesn't enter their mattresses. Now, this is a very big challenge, but as you said, most of these people don't know that if you throw garbage, there's a law that is going, you're facing the law. Now that is a challenge. Secondly, they don't know the impact, because for them it is a problem solved instantly. they are not paying the garbage guy. They are not paying anything. Now it is a problem solved, but they are not seeing the consequences where that act is going to bring in the next perhaps 5 years or 2 months or maybe tomorrow. Now, the first sector is sector to look at is the population. Are the population well conversant? Do they know the challenges of their activities or their actions? Because I was recently, some time back, I was in Banda and I found someone, there are these people who come, who go household collecting garbage for a living. Now, this person takes garbage because there's no designated place to dump this garbage and dumps it in a wetland down. So I managed to have a conversation with him, and he clearly told me that he doesn't know, and I consulted with a chairperson, and all that issue was resolved. Now, the first thing is, does the population know the consequences of their actions? No, I don't think so, because I have worked with these communities. They don't. Has the government done enough? No, it hasn't done enough, but regardless of having the resources. And have we, civil societies or other entities that are responsible for this, done enough? No, we have not done enough. And in my view, sensitization is key, because if you don't know the consequences of the problem of the action you're doing, it cannot change anything, even if I tell you the outcomes, the aftermath of what you're doing. Now, when it comes to the policies and laws that are supposed to make sure that these now, for example, improper, poor garbage disposal, yes, are counter-interacted. I'm happy that KCCA is doing a very good job. There's this law of people throwing garbage from their cars and all that, and at least when the ED is tagged anywhere, we are in a .com world, and if she's tagged anywhere, she works so swiftly, and people are soon arrested. But still, people keep on doing this. Why do they keep on doing this? Dumping garbage everywhere. It means they don't know the consequences of their actions. So it is upon us, first and foremost, to make we who know, to educate those that do not know, like the civil society organizations and other entities that know anything about the consequences of these populations' actions.
You're looking at a small-scale waste management issues, especially when it comes to homesteads. We have large-scale management issues when it comes to companies that are into large-scale production, especially when you look at industrial areas, there has been an issue of those companies failing to manage their waste, dumping sites where they dump their waste, and this has affected especially our wetlands and our water resources avenues.
Yes.
Now, as civil society organizations, you are also given the mandate of writing maybe to committees of parliament or writing to the ministers in line with advocacy when it comes to protection of these water resources and conservation areas. Let's talk about waste management with industries and companies. Do you feel the regulatory bodies are doing enough to make sure that they are reminding these companies, even if you're paying taxes, even if you are doing us a service of giving jobs to the young people, you're also mandated to make sure that the company is protected, or the country is protected in its environmental conservation laws?
I'm going to say this, but it's unfortunate that most of these agencies that are responsible for these regulations prefer revenue than the livelihoods of people and health of the population, as well as the ecosystem. Now, these are the people that know the policies well, and as well as the laws, and they are supposed to regulate these companies, these very big companies. Now, instead of making sure that they account for their actions, which affect a greater population much more than what they inhabit, they just overlook that, and they choose to receive revenue, because of course these companies pay taxes, and at the cost of these people, that perhaps if it is a river, there are many people that fetch water from there. Now, these chemicals that are going into the water, they are affecting very many things that are unseen with our naked eyes, beginning from soil, which we grow our crops, beginning from water we use for drinking and domestic use, and of course marine species that are in these waters. Now, when someone chooses to ignore the policies and the law they are supposed to use to regulate these companies, it is very unfortunate and very inhumane to me.
Okay, when before we get into the conservation discussion, do you really think that a country like Uganda will develop and actually actualize on the mineral production and mineral sector if they are focused more on climate change and conservation of the environment? Are we going to get the productivity we want from our mineral resources if we are minding so much about climate change?
Yes. Yes, we are going to get what we want economically as a country, because we need to grow. We are a very young population, we are a very young country, developing country, and like any other country, we need to reach a certain level such that we can afford our livelihoods. Because if you read the UN report, we have a very big population of people, me inclusive, who live below $1 a day. Yes, and if we are to surpass that, to make sure that we live above the poverty line, we need such minerals to develop our economy. Now, we can do this sustainably to make sure that at least there are ways to do it sustainably, because other countries have done it and we can also do it. Unfortunately for Uganda, I think we always choose the cheap unsustainable solutions, or perhaps options, and it is which are not good for the economy, for the environment. But as long as they give us what we want, it is what we go with. But there are several ways to do it sustainably and make sure that we achieve the economic goal as well as protecting the environment.
Okay. Let's have the discussion of environmental conservation.
Yes.
With environmental conservation, we are going to start with water bodies. When I was doing my research, there is the Nile Basin the Nile Basin Cooperative Framework Agreement that was entered into on the 13th of October 2024, and this was ratified by Uganda, South Sudan, Rwanda, Tanzania, DRC, and rejected by Egypt and Sudan. You know, entirely the Nile Basin, how it goes till Egypt when it pours into the Mediterranean Sea. It was more rights were given to Sudan then, because Sudan was before 2012 there was no South Sudan, so it was the whole Sudan back then. So Sudan and Egypt, because they were bigger states and they had more power then, they had more control of the Nile, and because that was the only source of water bodies. Yet when you looked at countries like Uganda, Rwanda, Tanzania, and DRC, they didn't share so much of the Nile. So the two countries that had the control, the biggest percentage of sustainability on the Nile, they rejected the Nile Basin Cooperative Framework. Now let's look at the issue of conservation vis-a-vis development. Still, I'm going to focus on it more because now we have investment in hydro energy production, and our energy sector needs to a sustainable avenue of having electricity so that we can have industries and all that. When you look at conservation of water resources, especially lakes, we have a few in the country. We are not so lacking like our neighbors. Is Uganda protecting its natural resources when it invests more in hydroelectricity power and dams? Is it protecting its natural resources, or are we going to look at a level where our water levels are low because we're having dams for electricity?
The water has never reduced ever, and I think those regions like the Karamoja region where there's a lot of drought, it's just because we have not done enough as a country to make sure that our countrymen get enough water. We have more than 100 lakes in Uganda, and I think we need enough energy, enough, I will say electricity. We need enough energy to make sure that we develop our country, because a country to develop, attract more investors and perhaps more people who can increase our GDP, we need energy and industrialization and all those factors combined. Now, the issue of water bodies and electricity and all that, it doesn't affect in any way. It has its own, of course, there's nothing that doesn't have the bitter side of it, of the whole situation. Now, if it is done within the sustainable way, and if the policies and guidelines, conservation guidelines, and they are followed efficiently, regardless of the fact that we always have shoddy work, as you know, our country, and also the fact that there's always the issue of underlooking or overlooking situations that might be disastrous to the whole biodiversity. I think we can do it in a more better way or sustainable way.
When it comes to issues of conservation, our biggest challenge has been natural forests. We had the Mavira issue, you talked about the Bugoma forest. There's also a forest in Entebbe here, I'm forgetting the name, but also there was a contestation by the municipality of Entebbe that part of that land had been given to the minister. And we've also seen the Senior Presidential Advisor on Environmental Issues, Professor Gilbert Bukenya, doing some good work in line with environmental sector. Now, when it comes to conservation of forests, we have a full authority, the National Forest Authority, that is mandated to protect these forest reserves. People have grown, and yes, they're looking for livelihood. Some of them are doing farming in these forests. Some of them are actually staying in these forests. But then we have the issue of fossils, or that is charcoal. This is now where you specialists in environment come and talk to us about renewable energy. As a young country like Uganda, when we look at some of the issues that are depleting our forests, it is for either timber or it is for charcoal. Now, what is the option we have? Because remember, we are a growing country and we have not invested so much in renewable energy. Yes. What is the solution we have as a country to protect forests, especially because that is where our challenge has been?
Yes. We have very many options and solutions to this problem. Fossil fuel generally, or just forests?
Just look at forests.
Forests. Forests are a very important sector. Yes, in the ecosystem, and we cannot live without forests. That is a fact. Now, we have had, I think, as a country, we have lost a very big percentage of our forest area. And unfortunately, because if you read our NDCs, nationally determined contributions, we need to have gotten to 21% of the forest cover, unlike in the previous years, by 2030. That is what we are determined to achieve by 2030, 21 forest cover, which is now around 15. And it's very unfortunate that most of our forests are massively being cut down. Natural forests, in fact, because if you go through Mavira, I want to appreciate NTV, Sudiri Arhanga, that has always, covered such issues, stories in Bugoma forest, in Mavira forest. Now, we have very many different options, and as a country, we haven't tackled so much in matters of other renewable energies, like because now this is electricity and we can use it for cooking. We have hydropower, we have methane, which comes from our own waste, and we haven't tapped into that opportunity of much more into that opportunity of renewable energy. Now, what we can use currently, what is available to use for cooking and all those fueling, we can still use. There's I've forgotten how it is called, but we have very many things that we can use concerning the fact that we
one
can.
One of the challenges we had with renewable energy, especially when it comes to conservation, because I attended the Ministry of Energy had a symposium, I think around 2024, which I attended when it came to renewable energy, and they were giving subsidies with either gas or electricity. But the challenges people have been saying when it comes to the renewable energy discussion is the costs of the utility costs of either electricity and the utility cost of gas. Now, the government has also put some subsidies, especially when it comes to companies. But to the person in the village, because let's leave uptown people, to the person in the village, are these subsidies felt enough, or are they an option to firewood and charcoal that they are used to and they have seen for over generations and years?
As you said before, the population of Uganda is growing so massively, and it cannot be controlled. So the longer we keep on producing, the more the population grows, and that is how we shall keep on encroaching on these forests. And the earlier we find a solution for making sure that we use renewable energies as fuel, for example, the earlier and the safer for our environment. Now, for a person up country or in these rural areas, they have grown up. For example, me, I come from Bushenyi, and I've grown up using firewood, and they still use firewood. And I remember there was a headmaster of a certain primary at our village, and he was using biogas straight from his cattle and other foodstuffs that are always remaining. And you know, it is a whole agricultural livelihood. So basically, he used biogas, which is sustainable and more favorable to the environment. These are the subsidies that these rural areas can use to make sure that at least they protect the environment. And this can be homemade. You don't have to industrialize it and, you know, make rocket science. It is not rocket science. I think it can be homemade, and these people can use it as a subsidy if they are sensitized well, because I don't think they are going to use it. In most cases, they have a kitchen outside the house, so if they know how properly to use it and how best they can put it into place, you know, wire it, this and that and all that, it is always very good and sustainable for the environment as well.
Okay, we have been with Noah having the issue of environmental discussions and conservations. I want to thank you for being with us. I want to remind you that we have a lunch hour from 1 p.m. to 2:15 with Pastor Teddy Naziri. The Wednesday Empowerment Service was here today. We have the ASAC mandate that happens on Friday, and the theme is still awakening the nation to serious repentance. It starts at 5 p.m. On Sunday, we have a special service on the 23rd. Victory Special Service, which will be at 3 p.m. Now, we thank you for being with us. The show is The Scorecard. Have a very beautiful morning.